During our placement, we had the opportunity to observe all different types of learners and were able to assist in ways in which helped us acquire new knowledge about how students learn and how the teachers differentiate their teaching methods to meet the specific learning needs of each individual student in their class. We all came back with many interesting stories and experiences, and it was great to hear what we all had to share.
Part 1. Acknowledging diversity.
Multiculturalism in education is important as given that education is such a powerful site of cultural transmission. During my placement at Dandenong North Primary School, there were many students who were not born in Australia and several of them had English as an additional language. The EAL classes were very interesting to observe as the teachers had to change their styles to suit these children who do not have English as a first language. They had classroom instructions in 5 different languages, acknowledging the multiculturalism in the school. As well as this, what also stood out to me was that the educational assistants were often from a different cultural background and were able to assist the students in articulating their English from their first language.
In my grade 4 class on placement, it was interesting to acknowledge the diverse range of learners. In my class, I had students who were at a grade 6 level, whilst one particular student who had learning disabilities was only at a foundation to Year 1 level of reading and writing. This meant that the teacher had to acknowledge AITSL Standard 1.5, which discusses differentiating teaching to meet the specific needs of students across a full range of abilities. Along with this, the teacher used strategies to support full participation of students with disability. Through the teacher's work, this allowed this particular student to gain equity within his class.
In both situations, the teachers were aware of the diversity of culture and learning levels within their schools. Both schools used proactive approaches to the different learning styles and levels of their students. This can only happen if teachers find out about what the students know and what they bring in their virtual school bag, in order for different teaching strategies and inclusive practices to be implemented. Both schools seem like they have done their research on students in order for them to reach their full learning potentials.
Hannah's experience was heavily based on where her school was located. Dandenong North Primary is situated in a low socio-economic area and therefore had higher exposure to multiculturalism. This meant that Hannah was able to witness a community of people embracing different cultures, which is a direct acknowledgement of Teaching Standard 1.3, which is students with diverse linguistic, cultural, religious and socio-economic background. In Emily's case, the school was situated in a middle-class area. Therefore, there was a higher focus on acknowledging the development of diverse learners. Now, this aligned with Teaching Standard 1.5, which is differentiate teaching to meet the specific learning needs of students across their full range of abilities.
Part 2. Acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders.
The Aboriginal flag was displayed in the school hall where the school gathered. As well as this, in one of the Grade 3 EAL classes, there were lesson plans about Aboriginal dreaming and vocabulary words that can be used to describe this. They also watched videos on the Rainbow Serpent and had writing programs that involved this. The acknowledgement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture and history aligns with the AITSL Standard 1.4, Strategies for Teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Students. In Chapter 10 of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies in the Classroom, Kay Price states that educating students on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander studies is all about educating all Australians in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, histories, societies and cultures. As well as this, she also states that teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander studies is widely seen to be a positive step on the pathway to reconciliation, a position referred to in the AITSL standards.
At Warrenwood Primary School, they've incorporated the AITSL Standard 2.4, understand and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. The way they have done this is by creating a mural throughout the school, which represents the school's past leading into their future. They've worked on this with an Indigenous artist to create a homage to Australia's first people at the beginning of the mural. Upon speaking with the Grade 1 teacher, she explained that she once had an Indigenous student in her class. This teacher learnt about the particular student's mob and taught the class about her specific custom, which made it most relevant to that particular student. This is a direct example of AITSL Standard 1.4, which was Strategies for Teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Students.
It is clear at both Hannah and Laura's schools that there was acknowledgement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Both schools took extra consideration to incorporate Indigenous studies within the classroom. There is so much a teacher can do to ensure their teaching is educationally enriched through the inclusion of Indigenous culture and history. This was evident in both the girls' schools and can be recognised that at both schools there were policies put into place to enforce a respect and understanding.
It was quite evident that there was recognition of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students in both Hannah and Laura's schools. However, there were a few differences between the two schools in the way they acknowledged the culture. Hannah's school incorporated the Aboriginal culture and background through videos, lesson plans, and vocabulary words. With Laura's experience, the Aboriginal culture was delved into through an individual student and her particular mob. This was most relevant to the individual student to feel accepted and respected by her entire class and teacher.
Part 3. Actively including all learners in daily activities of the classroom.
The Melbourne Declaration's Goal 1 is that Australian schooling promotes equity and excellence. This was demonstrated to me at Warrenwood Primary in regards to a student called James. James had suffered an acquired brain injury from birth. This meant that his speech is delayed. This did not stop the teacher from having James speak to the whole class and explain how he reached the answer he did. Each student listened respectfully, as this was the expectation clearly set by the teacher. The teacher also had given him a nickname, Wriggles, to create that comfortable rapport with this student. The other students were also encouraged to call him Wriggles, and this created an incredibly inclusive environment.
When I was in a Year 1 class at placement, there were quite a few kids with learning difficulties. It was interesting to see the strategies used by both the teacher and the aide in that classroom. One of the boys had attention deficit disorder, which meant that he had trouble focusing in class. However, a strategy put into play in their classroom environment was the use of a wobble chair for this particular child. This meant that he was able to move around on this chair at his desk, but it would also mean that he would be able to focus more on his work. I was able to observe this whilst in their classroom. It essentially gave the child something to stimulate his motor senses, thus leaving him with the ability to focus more on his task. The teacher knew that this child had issues with his attention span, so by observing and getting to know the way his mind worked, she was able to put this successful strategy into practice.
Comparing both Mikaela and Laura's stories. Firstly, in Laura's school, James was accepted for who he is and the students treated him equally, aligning with the Melbourne Declaration. They were also very patient with him despite his disability. He was able to feel capable of undertaking tasks like the rest of his peers. Just like at Mikaela's school, the boy was able to be included in the daily tasks with the rest of his classmates, despite his learning difficulties. In both cases, both students were made to feel included and not excluded for their differences.
The teacher at Laura's school made more of an effort to make the student feel included and a part of the class. Whereas at the school I was at, the strategies implemented were more focused on the students' learning rather than the social factor of the classroom. However, both equally are as important as each other.
Juxtaposing experiences, we have discovered that each of us had very diverse experiences at placement, but many similarities as well. We all found that the schools and teachers were very respectful towards Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students and made it evident that they were acknowledging the culture as they believe we should be giving every Australian child a chance to learn about this country's Indigenous history and culture. We also found that there are many students that do need the extra support in class, and we were able to observe and discover the many ways that teachers alter their teaching styles to try their best to cater for the special needs of each individual student in their class. Overall, it was a great experience for us, and we are very excited to see what our future in the teaching field holds for us.